Maybe you've been trying Final Cut Pro for a little bit and you're missing some features that you had in Premiere Pro or maybe some other editing software. So in this video, I'll be showing you how to use adjustment layers, motion blur effects, and also sound only transitions. So first, you're gonna want to go to the link that's in the description and download the adjustment layer, motion blur, and sound only. It's free, so just follow the link, click add to cart, and then download those files. And then you're gonna want to unzip them. And then the adjustment layer, you're gonna place under movies, and then motion templates, and then titles. So you're gonna wanna place that adjustment layer folder in there. The motion blur folder, you're also gonna wanna put under titles, and then have that motion blur folder in there. And lastly, the sound only transition, you're gonna put that in transitions and dissolves. So once you have that, let's go into Final Cut. You're gonna find the adjustment layer under the titles tab here, and then under custom, and then you'll see RT adjustment layer here. Then that you can just drag on top of your footage, make it however long or short you want it to be. And then make any adjustments to that layer and it'll affect everything underneath it. So for example, I'll make some color corrections to it, some grading, and then you'll see it'll affect all this footage that's underneath it. And then you can toggle it on and off by pressing V, so you can see the difference with it on or off. And then you can put any effects or color grading on there. You can put grain. It's pretty much the same as an adjustment layer in Premiere Pro. Next, your motion blur effect, you're gonna find under the titles tab as well, under motion blur. And you have weak motion blur, strong motion blur, and medium motion blur. So you'll just have to play around with those. If you don't know what motion blur does, it basically makes footage look like there's motion. Like you can see that this is motion blur. I've put a motion blur effect on there. If I toggle it off, you can see it doesn't have that motion blur. It just makes the footage a little more cinematic if you're shooting in like a high frame rate or a high shutter speed. So that's where motion blur is really helpful. Lastly, the sound only transition you're gonna find in the transitions tab, which is right here, and then under dissolves. And then there it is, the sound only transition. These all right here are sound only transitions. I use that so that it only transitions the audio and not the video. I don't know why they don't include this as a default transition in Final Cut Pro. But anyways, for example, I'll delete this, and yeah, so you just drag it on there, adjust it to how long you want it to be. And then usually what I do is change the fade type to linear. That way it's just a linear crossfade between the audio. Mainly I use it just to create a nice smooth sounding transition between two clips. And it eliminates any like popping noise from a hard cut between two audio clips. So hopefully that's helpful. Next, I'm gonna go over some settings you probably are gonna wanna change right away when you start using Final Cut Pro. So hit Command, to open the settings window. And then under General, I have changed my color correction default to color wheels. I think by default it's on color board, but I changed it to color wheels because that way whenever I click any clip, for example, I click this clip, right away under the color correction tab, it shows the color wheels. It depends on what you want your default color correction to be. For example, you can use curves as your default, or you can use a color board as your default, but I like to use the color wheels as my default color correction. Next, under Playback, we're gonna wanna turn off background render, because usually Final Cut's really good at playing your footage back. Even if you have an older Mac, it usually is able to play it fine without rendering. And what background render does is it renders your whole entire timeline. Whatever's in the timeline, it'll render it. So it takes up a lot of hard drive space as well. So if I were you, I would try using Final Cut without the background render checked. The next thing is under player background, I like to have it on checkerboard instead of black or white, because of when I'm resizing clips, it's just a lot easier to see the checkerboard. Next, under the import tab, there's where you want to keep your files. So there's an option to copy to library storage location, and then an option for leave files in place. I always have this clicked because I don't want Final Cut to copy all the files into the Final Cut library. I'd rather put it on leave files in place. That way it just references my video files directly from Finder. And then if you're also keeping your files in your Finder and you have this selected, it's basically just gonna double the space that your footage takes on your hard drive. Next, I'm gonna go over the magnetic timeline a little bit, because I know for new Final Cut Pro users, it can kind of be frustrating. So for example, I have some footage here in the timeline, but I want to put an empty space between these two clips here, and I can't just drag the clip over. So what you can do, I mean, you can change the order of the clips like this, but if I want to put a space, what you can do is go Option W, and then boom, now there's a space, an empty space between those two clips, and you can adjust the length of that space just by dragging the ends of it. Another way to do it, so I'm going to delete that space, is, for example, you can select these clips, and then you're going to want to change your mouse to the position tool. So you can do that by pressing P. So I press P, and now I can move these clips and it'll stay wherever I move it. So now it created an empty space between those. I'm going to switch back to A, which is the normal pointer tool. And yeah, if I switch back to the position tool, I can drag these clips wherever and they'll stay and right over whatever is there. Another thing I've seen people do is they just edit everything on top of the empty space thing. So they'll just stretch this empty space throughout their timeline, and then they'll do all their edits on top. Just like this. So kind of like how you do in Premiere. That way you can just drag the clips wherever you want and make changes that way. So that's another option for you if you really hate the magnetic timeline. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is, let's say you have music underneath and it's linked at a certain location. If you can see this line here, it's linked at a certain place in the music. And if you want to change where it's linked, because that can be helpful sometimes, you just hold down Command and Option and then click wherever you want that link to go. And then if I want to change it again, just hold down Option and Command, click wherever you want it to go. There it is. If I want to change it here, click Option and Command, put it there. It's helpful because, like, now if I'm adjusting here, that music will stay in this link to this location. That's pretty much all I have for today. Hopefully that was helpful for you, and make sure to ask me any questions if you have any, and also give suggestions if you like these kind of tutorials, or also suggestions for future tutorials that you'd like to see about Final Cut Pro. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.